I think more than just a consumer trend, as Emily said, I think premiumization has been at the heart of many manufacturer strategies over the last 10 years. But certainly given the current economic climate and macroeconomic climate that we're operating in, many are questioning whether that remains the right strategy to be on. So in my presentation today, we're going to have a look at what impact those macroeconomic factors are having on the trade-up opportunity and ask, where is that trade-up opportunity still present? Now, I'm going to focus very much on the on-premise today. And whether you call it on-premise, on-trade, HoReCa, gastro, what we need to call it is a pretty important market for BevAl. And it's even more important for the spirits category. Over 2 and 3 euros spent on spirits is spent in the on-premise. And we also know that with higher average prices in the on-premise compared to the off-premise, driving growth within the on-premise is driving profitable growth for our business. Now, we also know the on-premise as the heart of premiumization. So it's an important category or an important part of the market for us to be talking about today. And I think the reason why it's called that is because, when consumers are out in the on-premise, they want to try something different. They want to treat themselves to a great experience, and that drives what brands they choose. And we have a bartender who influences a consumer to choose a particular drink. And when they're out in the on-premise, they are looking to choose something that is premium. And they tell us this when we ask them as well. So 2/3 of consumers tell us that they prefer to have these high quality drinks. And the good thing is that over half of those consumers then tell us that they're willing to pay for the privilege. So we can definitely see that consumers in the on-premise prefer to drink less but better. And that's indicated here on this chart as well. So we asked consumers across the globe, if your total bill was the same, what would you rather have? Would you rather have fewer higher quality drinks or more lower quality drinks? And you can see that resoundingly, consumers tell us that they prefer to have fewer higher quality drinks. But things are starting to change. And we can see on the right of the chart the direction of travel for these trends since last year. And we can see that there has been a shift from consumers choosing 2 higher quality drinks down into more consumers telling us they prefer 3 or 4 medium or lower quality drinks. Now, super premium has remained relatively stable, and I think there is something in that we want to come back to. But I think on the whole, this message does appear to paint a picture of some down trading going on. And you can really understand why, right? That macroeconomic situation that we talked about before is having an impact on their ability to trade up. So we're here in Germany, and in a market like Western Europe, 38% of consumers are telling us that their finances are in a worse position this year than they were last year, compared to just 10% who are telling us that they're in a better position. Now, the fact that there are 10% telling us that they're in a better position does lead us to some polarization, and I think there's a link there, right, between that 10% who are feeling better off and the fact that super premium on the previous chart was sort of holding its own. And if we're able to think about how we can target that 10%, then that is an area where premiumization can still benefit. But on the whole, I think it's fair to say that consumer wallets are starting to feel a little bit tighter. And that's having an impact on the volumes within the category. Now, spirits as a whole, as a category, is already facing some fairly significant pressure. We've come out of a really great post-COVID period into perhaps some normalization there. But in a market like the UK, we've got standard spirit volumes down by 9% in the on-premise, and super premium and premium spirits down in double digits and ahead of that. But I'm not here today to tell you that premiumization's dead. This isn't a funeral. I'm not writing an obituary for premium spirits. I'm here to tell you that there are still opportunities out there for us to win. We just need to work a little bit harder than we have done before to try and achieve that. And the first thing that we really need to do is to identify, target, and adapt to where that trade-up opportunity is still happening. And once we've done that, we really need to then make sure that we adapt our offer to meet that need, deliver the right message to the consumer and to the bartenders, and use the right leverage in venue to make sure that we execute brilliantly. So we're going to go through and have a look at some of the key trends within each of these areas and understand how we can still gain our premiumization there. And I'm going to start with that demographic angle from a consumer perspective. Now, interestingly, when we look at that same chart that we showed before about whether consumers prefer value or volume and how that's changed versus last year, millennials are actually the only consumer group who've increased the proportion of tellers that they would prefer one luxury super premium drink. So definitely feels as though this is an area or consumer group who we'd like to target. Now, it's not purely everyone just going up into super premium. There is some down trading going on here. Not all millennials are the same, but it is still something that we can see an area of opportunity. So how do we take advantage of that opportunity? Well, when we look into their repertoire, what we can see is that spirits with a mixer feature quite prominently within their repertoire. So when we're thinking about our serve strategy, we really need to be thinking about how do we deliver simple serves to win this consumer. And I think part of the reason why spirits with a mixer over-indexes or is important in their repertoire is because when we think about where to play and where to target these millennial consumers who are likely to trade up, it is very much about late night. And whether that's about nightclubs or late night bars, that is where the premium millennial consumer over-indexes. Now, clearly, this is also an area of the market which is under some fairly significant pressure at the moment, both in terms of outlet closures and changing consumer behavior. So if this is a part of your strategy, it is one to think carefully about. But undoubtedly, this is where that consumer goes, and that's where spirits with a mixer plays particularly strongly. Once you've identified where to play, it's then thinking about more how to win. And this consumer over-indexes for celebrity endorsement. Now, I am a millennial myself, and you walk down through this hall in particular, there's loads of stands that could catch your attention, but you've got a Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg gin and juice stand about 4 stands down the way, and that just piques your interest, right? It's something that's familiar, and I think that the role that can play can influence consumers to choose that particular product. When it comes to in the on-premise venue itself, they're a very visual consumer. So making sure that we nail things like back bar display, menu listings, pictures on menus are all ways that we're going to influence this consumer's path to purchase. One of the ways that we need to learn to win, and one of the scenarios we need to learn to win in, is in the earlier day part. You've probably heard quite a lot about this trend, but particularly true for the premium consumer. We've got 1 in 5 on-premise visitors going out earlier. For the premium consumer, that's actually 1 in 4. If you're operating in a market like Asia, for that premium consumer, it's actually 1 in 3. So everyone's going out earlier. So how do we make sure that we win in this earlier day part to try and capture that trade-up opportunity, which used to be our heartland? Well, I think the key is we need to really understand the change in occasionality associated with that earlier occasion. Those special occasions that were happening late night aren't happening as much during that daytime trading period. Typically, it's going to be a lower tempo occasion, which is going to happen during the day. And that's going to have different consumer drivers to purchase that you need to consider when you're thinking about how to win trade up here. With the consumers in this earlier day part, they're probably looking for different things from a drink. They're looking for longer drinks. They're looking for lower ABV serves. They're looking for lighter drinks. I think to an extent, this is where spritz and aperitivo have really gained some strength. A lighter, lower ABV cocktail serve winning in an earlier day part. It's also about being that strong brand, right? Because if we want to get into that everyday consumer's repertoire, we need to be that strong brand that they choose all the time. And to get into that repertoire, we need to align with that consumer's personal values. We can see here that 74% of consumers who are likely to trade up tell us that it's important that the brand that they're choosing aligns with their values. And I think we've seen a really great example for the wrong reasons in the US in the last couple of years with Bud Light, where the brand chose to associate itself with someone who didn't align with their core consumer base's values. And we're almost 2 years down the line and volume's still being impacted. It's quite difficult to recover from that. So we really need to be thinking about what's important to these trade-up consumers so that we can get into their repertoires. But it's not just the consumer that you need to be communicating this to, it's also to the bar staff in venues, because they're the ones who are ultimately going to help leverage that trade-up opportunity in venues. When we ask consumers what influences their drinks choice the most in venues, we can see that recommendations are particularly important. whether that's friends or family, or whether that's bar staff. And we can see here that those who are likely to trade up in green versus those who are unlikely to trade up in red, the biggest over-index for those likely to trade up is the bartender. So making sure that we are influencing the bartender to influence the consumer is going to be critical to make sure that we continue to win that trade-up opportunity. Now, not only are these recommendations extremely influential, but they're also extremely effective. Bartenders tell us that 95% of the time that they make a recommendation, the guest's going to choose it. That's a pretty good hit rate. And they're happening very frequently too, right? So you can see here globally, 79% of bartenders are making a recommendation to a guest every shift. In a market like the US, this is 96%. In a market like the UK, this is 91%. So making sure that we are part of the recommendations that bartenders are making as spirit brands is how we're going to continue to gain that trade-up opportunity. And the odds are already stacked in our favor as premium brands a little bit here, right, in terms of premiumization as a trend, because bartenders love to recommend premium brands. It's the third most important factor in the choice of brand that they recommend is the quality. So great news from a premiumization point of view is that bartenders already want to recommend these brands, right? But there's a double win here, and I think if we can become one of the bartenders' own favorite brands, we're going to benefit even more. And I think that's where events like today come in, right? Getting liquid on lips to those bartenders, telling them your story about how your brand aligns with the values of their consumer and of the bartender themselves is going to be a really important way to make sure that you are one of those brands that they recommend. And if you do that, that's how we're going to get that trade-up opportunity in venue. So to wrap it up, I really do believe that there is an opportunity for premiumization still within the marketplace today, but we just have to be a lot more focused and a lot more targeted about how we go after it. We really need to be thinking about who is the consumer who's still trading up, what occasions are they still trading up on, and what occasions are they still happening in from an on-trade point of view. Once we've done that, it's then about making sure that we adapt our offer to meet the needs of the consumer on that particular occasion. It's about delivering the right brand message about our brand to the consumer and to the bartender. And lastly, it's about executing brilliantly in bars and in the on-premise. And that's about making sure that we get that bartender advocacy strategy right.